In this video, I want to start talking about an introduction to coordinate geometry. This should be a refresher of what you learned in middle school and in Algebra 1, but I just want to make sure we're all up to date on what we need to know in order to go forward in geometry. So we're going to start off with looking at this blank sheet of paper. And this blank sheet of paper kind of represents the plane that we've been dealing with up to this point. So we don't have any special points or lines on the plane when we've been talking about triangles and quadrilaterals. It's just been kind of an empty page. But when we're dealing with coordinates, the first thing we start with is, the way I think of it is kind of, we start off with the number line that you learned about in elementary school. So we've got 1 here and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. It keeps on going. And in the other direction, we've got -1. The negative numbers are over here on the left. So hopefully this is something that seems very familiar to you. And in coordinate geometry, we've got a special name for the number line. We're going to call it the x-axis. Okay, and then what coordinate geometry adds into this is it adds a second number line, one that goes up and down. And instead of calling it the x-axis, we're going to call this one the y-axis. And this number line has numbers going up in the same way, except that here the positive numbers are going up and the negative numbers are going down. And of course, we've got all of the numbers between them. So, this number is a point on the number line, and its coordinate would be 1.5 or 1.5. So it's not just the integers that are listed here, even though those are the only ones that are kind of put out on the grid. The way I remember the x-axis and the y-axis and keep them separated from each other is that, just like we learned about this number line before we learned about this one in our education, the letter X comes before the letter Y in the alphabet. That's how I keep the x-axis and y-axis straight. So we use this scheme to give a coordinate pair, kind of an address, to every point on the number line, or to every point in the plane, the same way that every point on the number line has a number that's attached to it. So for instance, if I've got this point over here and I want to know its coordinates, we start off from where the x-axis and y-axis meet. We call this point the origin. And origin means the starting or the beginning of something. Just like in comic books, Spider-Man's origin story is that he was a teenager who was bitten by a radioactive spider, and that gave him superpowers. So that's how Spider-Man got started. When we want to find the coordinates of this point, we need to start from the origin, just like Spider-Man did. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out how far left and right do we need to go on our original number line. And so we're going to go 3 points to the right. We're going to go to where 3 is on the first number line. And so that's going to be the first part of the address of this thing. And then we're going to figure out how far do we need to move up or down along the new number line. So it's up by 2 points. So we're going to call this 3, 2. To talk about how we start from the origin, we go 3 points to the right along the first number line, and then we go 2 points up along the second number line. Okay, we've got the same thing going on with positive and negative numbers. We can figure out points all over this plane. For instance, let's say that I want to find the point whose coordinates are -1, 4. How would I find that point on this grid? Well, like before, we start from the origin and we find our first coordinate, our x coordinate is -1. So we need to find -1 on the original number line on the x-axis. And so -1 is 1 point to the left of the origin. And then we need to move according to the number on the y-axis for the y-coordinate. So we need to go 4 points up. So where we have this intersection of -1 on the first number line and +4 on the second number line is where we find the points whose coordinates are -1, 4. We can also have points that are on the x-axis or y-axis, and they have coordinates as well, although it takes just a little bit of extra thinking to figure out what those coordinates would be. So let's find the coordinates of this point right here. What do you think it would be? We're going to start the way we always start. We start from the origin. So how far do we move left or right? We don't move left or right at all. We're just going to go straight down to get to the point we want to talk about. So based on that, what should our x coordinate of this point be? Since we're not moving left or right at all, we want to have an x coordinate of 0. And then what's our y coordinate? We're going to move down 3 spaces. So we're using -3 as our second coordinate. Okay? So every one of these points has an x coordinate and a y coordinate. And notice that it's a little bit backwards, but it makes sense when you think about it, that a point that's on the y-axis, you can notice it from its coordinates because it has an x coordinate of 0. So an x coordinate of 0 means that it's on the y-axis, and it's the opposite in the other way, that if a point has a y coordinate of 0, that would mean it's got to be on the x-axis, because that means that after we've moved left or right, that 0 in the y coordinate means that we don't move up or down at all. So that point is just going to be on the x-axis. So that was a lot of stuff that you've already learned. So hopefully that's just waking up all those neurons in your brain, remembering everything that you knew about plotting points in coordinate geometry.